It all started at camp about 2 years ago. My friend John and I were at this camp which I cannot remember the name of. We had heard rumors from all the kids that this camp was some sort of a cult camp, but that they kept it a secret. To be honest, my friend John and I didn't believe the rumors. The camp seemed pretty fine to me, and the people were really nice and quite friendly. I got bunked in the cabin with John and some other kids. For the first 2 nights there were no problems, everything was fine. But on the 3rd night things got a little creepy. John and I decided to sneak out of our cabin at night and check out this place where this kid supposedly found rocks that were placed in the circle with an upside down cross. Like I said before, John and I thought this was a joke, so we went to check it out for ourselves. We brought flashlights because it was really dark. We looked around for 30 minutes and didn't find a thing. As we were walking back, John stopped me so he could tie his shoe. We heard a noise and it seemed like it came from the back of us, so we pointed our flashlights towards where the sound came from. We didn't see anything, so we thought it was just an animal and it didn't really bother us too much. It was a camp in the mountains. Of course you're going to get a lot of animals walking at night, so we just kept walking back to our cabin. As we kept walking, we heard crunching of leaves, which sounded like footsteps behind us. We turned to look behind us and we saw a shadow hiding behind a tree. When we shined our light to the tree, the shadow's head hid behind the tree very fast. This was enough to scare both of us, so we ran. We kept running until we were sure that this thing or shadow wasn't following us anymore. We soon figured out we were lost. We knew we had to find a way back or else the counselor in our cabin would find out we left, so we kept walking. Finally we saw a light, so we thought it was the cabin, but it wasn't. It was torches, and around the torches were rocks in a circle and an upside down cross in the middle, with what sort of looked like an Illuminati sign in the middle also. I know this is going to sound stupid, but we were surprised, not scared, that this whole time the kid was telling the truth. I decided I was going to take a picture to show all the kids in my cabin, but before I had a chance to, John and I heard a twig snap in the back of us. We turned around slowly, and there were people in the darkness all hiding behind trees. It looked like their eyes were glowing, but I couldn't tell. We started to sprint as we were screaming. We didn't know where we were going, so we just kept going straight. Finally, we found our cabin, went inside, and went to bed. The next day, we didn't tell anybody about what we saw, but I guess the rumors the kids were spreading were true after all. Hi, my name is Tom, and what I'm about to tell you sounds completely unbelievable, but what I'm about to tell you is true. For context, a few years ago I took part in a study to do with autism, mental processing, and memory. The only thing about that study important to the story is that it proved to have as near as is possible to eidetic memory. Upside of autism, I guess. This is how I can go into so much detail about what I'm about to say. When I was 3 years old, I distinctly remember the first time I saw a full moon. It was in October of 1991. I asked my mother why the moon wasn't the banana shape I'd always seen in picture books. My father laughed, and explained it to me using a children's astronomy book. The month after, in November, is when the strange events begin. I had been looking forward to seeing my next full moon, and on the night it was meant to happen, my parents watched from the kitchen window as I sprinted outside with the same astronomy book in hand. But I quickly dashed back inside, telling my parents the moon is poorly, it's the wrong color. A yellow-tinged moon isn't uncommon where I live, but this again was the first one I'd seen of that color. After this had been explained to me, I asked about the crossed green rings around it. My dad looked at my mom and told me to stay with her before walking out into the garden. He took one look at the moon before coming back inside and getting a camera. My mom and I followed him back outside, only for all of us to see a perfectly white full moon. and the crossed green rings are nowhere. Fast forward many years. At this point I'm 21 and married. My wife is watching TV in the living room while I'm sorting out a Freeview box in the bedroom. There wasn't much room in there, so it was simply easier for me to do it alone. In the screen of the television, I see something from the window being reflected. A glowing orb of sky blue light. Thinking someone is being a dick with a laser pen, I turn to shut the curtains, only to see a floating orb of sky blue light. This orb seems to take a moment to realize that I've seen it, as it's only there for a second at max before flying off down the street with speed that it can't humanly have. The best way I can describe the acceleration is like something out of a Roadrunner cartoon. It was instantaneous. Everything down the street in the direction it flew went nuts. House alarms, car alarms, street lights, all of them started wailing, flashing, and freaking out. As I look the other way to find out if that's happening the other way the orb didn't fly, I once again see the cross green rings around the moon. The television signal didn't recover for over an hour. 6 weeks after this, I'm divorced and living in my own flat. There are a few bumps and knocks sometimes, but nothing that can't be explained by the abundance of wildlife in the trees around here. I've had an owl fly into my window before, and let bats out more than once. I'm on the second floor, so I can safely keep my windows open at night. Sometimes bats decide my flat is a nice place to sleep. The window being open is important here. The night is where I feel most at home, so staying up until around 4 or 5 a.m. isn't uncommon for me. As I work from home, around 2:30 in the morning I hear a van pull up outside. Thinking this was strange, I go from the laptop I've been mending to look out the window. My neighbor has brought his work van home instead of his car, which he did when he planned to wash it the next day. He begins getting something out of the van, and I turn to go back to what I was doing. The sound of keys dropping outside my front door rings out clear as day. Yeah, my neighbor lives across the hall from me, and yes, he's just pulled up, but he can't get through the security door and up 2 flights of stairs to his door opposite mine in that time, unless he's got the power of the Flash. I will forever regret looking through the peephole. Outside my window, the hallway is only lit by light coming in from outside. This shouldn't be possible. The lights outside are permanently switched on at night for fire safety, and even have a battery backup so that they work in the event of a power cut. There's enough light for me to make out the shape of the thing standing there, with its back to my door. It was humanoid, and knew when it had been seen, for it turned around slowly to glare right at me with eyes the like of which I thought could only be described in a horror story. Never have I understood the phrase, "my blood ran cold," until I saw those eyes. They were lifeless and empty. It was as though I was staring into an abyss of absolute nothingness, and felt like I had ice running through my veins. At this point, I can't move. Whatever this monster is obviously knows that, as it reaches out to the cupboard doors that are just outside, and drags its hand down it, making a splintering sound. For a reason I still, to this day, can't explain. This enrages me. How dare this thing damage part of the place where I live? I spin around and grab my keys off the shelf behind me, and throw my door open to nearly knock my neighbor down the stairs he's currently walking up. He freezes, looking at the cupboard door directly in front of him. I turned around and there are 5 gashes in the wooden door, left by the creature's claws. It's a mark that no human could have left without tools and time. My neighbor refuses to talk about it and hurries inside his flat, and I hear him checking his lock. I do the same, and plan to investigate more when it isn't the middle of the night. The next afternoon, I manage to catch my neighbor as he's leaving, but before either of us can say anything, We're both staring at his cupboard door again. His undamaged cupboard door. We even try his key to make sure it's the same door, and there is no sign of repair. Again, he refuses to speak about it. 4 weeks later, I'm laying in bed at around 3:40 a.m., watching YouTube on my iPad. The next thing I know is a bright spot of green light in my vision, growing larger and brighter, before it's suddenly 4:30 a.m. Every single device in my room, my iPad, my phone, even my vape pen has been switched off, and each had lost 35% of its power. I played around with my iPad the day after, and I couldn't get it to replicate this power drain no matter what strain I put it under. Never mind having it switched off. 2 weeks after this, the same thing happens to me again, only this time the power drain is only 10%, and the time skip was over an hour. There is also a scrape on the side of my left ankle, which looks like I've been scratching it too much and broken the skin. This wasn't there before. 6 months after the encounter with that being, my neighbor was involved in a serious car accident. His injuries were so severe that after 9 months in the hospital, he had to move into an adapted ground floor home, as he was no longer able to manage the stairs, and most likely never will again. I recently turned 30, and this is the first time I've told anyone this story. You probably think I'm insane or have an out-of-control imagination. After all, that's what I'd think of all this, if I wasn't the one who lived through it. First off, I never believed in ghosts until I came into contact with one. My name is Dan, and I am 16. Ever since I can remember, I have always loved American history, and have been fascinated by the wars America has participated in. The war that I am most into is the Civil War. I am a firm believer after the experience that I had at one of the most haunted places on the planet. That place is Gettysburg. The story takes place in the spring of 2017. For spring break, my mother and I decided to take a trip out to Gettysburg with my grandparents, since my grandfather was the one who initially got me into the Civil War. My family has been going to Gettysburg since the early 1970s, and I myself have been there 8 times. We had toured the battlefield during the day, and I wanted to tour the battlefield again since I was leaving the next day. My mom agreed to take me out again that evening. Well, my mom and I were out in the area called Little Round Top, where some of the most ferocious fighting of the 3-day engagement took place. I was driving our car behind the wheel. This particular battlefield was pitch dark, not a single street lamp for miles, and my mom and I were the only ones out there. While I was driving, I started to get a feeling of dread, and I was becoming anxious. I could only see what was in the darkness ahead of my headlights. The darkness engulfed us as if we were driving into a black hole. All that we could hear was silence. As I came up to a crossroads, I got a sense of fear and looked to my left. As I looked, I am sure the color in my face drained out, and I had a look of stark terror. Outside to my left, about 50 feet out, was the gray, semi-transparent torso of a Confederate soldier. He wore the typical style with that gray outfit that was typical for most of the battle. I was unable to see his face or his legs because this apparition only appeared from the waist up. He was stopped in the middle of the road, just walking towards us. The time I spent staring at this figure felt like hours, but had only been a few seconds. As soon as I came to, I turned the car right and sped out of there. This is me sharing from my personal experience. Whether you choose to believe it or not is up to you. It was a warm summer night, and my friends and I had gone drinking at a popular local bar. We started a conversation talking about ghost stories and ghost hunting while we were drinking. I believed in the supernatural, so I believed almost everything relating to it. I wasn't much of a heavy drinker, so yeah, it was kind of a weird thing for me to do. They mentioned to me about exploring an abandoned building 15 minutes away from where we were. So by the time the bar closed up for the night, they had the idea to explore the building right after. I asked them if they had explored the place and if it was a good idea to do such a thing considering how much they've been drinking. They told me they had explored the place the day before, and that they sobered up, so we drove to the nearest street closest to the building. Keep in mind this was around 2 or 3 a.m. We had to walk through a forest to get to it. Once we got there, I saw what looked like a big dam-like structure holding water. I asked them, so how exactly do we get around there? They replied with, we just have to balance on the edge of the dam. Lucky for us, the edge was flat and easy to walk on rather than rounded off, which would make it hard to balance. We made it to one of the entrances to the building and entered through the door. We stuck together and explored the place. It gave me an eerie feeling, and I was the only one that had gotten that feeling because my dad is somewhat of an exorcist or priest or some sort in our religion. We explored the first 2 floors and found nothing interesting but graffiti on the walls. Then comes the top floor, the 3rd floor. I was in front of the 2 friends because they were a bit scared and creeped out. We were walking in one of the rooms and one of us had found a small room with what looked like a stool in the middle of it. I shined my flashlight over to my friends and asked, "Did you guys see this when you were exploring the other day?" They nodded and said, "No, we haven't gotten this far." So I walked into the room and got closer to the stool. What I saw on the stool was something I could never forget. On that stool was a Raggedy Ann doll on its back, and right through it was a knife, as if it was holding it down. Chills ran down my spine because that was a sign of demonic presence. So I turned around and walked out to my friends at the door, and I shit you not, the wall and ceiling where the door was a drawing of a pentagram. I kept my composure, and as scared as I was, I didn't want to scream to startle my friends and create a panic. So I told them we needed to leave. I left the room shortly after and overheard my male friend, let's call him V, speaking to me. I heard most of what he was saying, like asking me what I saw, and then I had a sudden loss of hearing in my right ear, where he was. It sounded like as if you were underwater talking, and you can hear the muffling. So I had shone my light over him and asked, "Say what?" Behind him was what I thought was his shadow on the wall in the distance. But it was too dark to be a shadow because shadows create a gradient. No, this was a black figure on the wall, a silhouette. My eyes had widened and I froze for a quick second. I told them we seriously need to get out of here, and so we did. On the way home, I asked if they had seen a painting of a full figure on the wall when we were on the top floor. They said they didn't see a thing of any sort, so that freaked me out. They kept asking me why and what did I see. I couldn't break it to them, because I didn't want whatever it is to follow after speaking about it. Unfortunately, I was the unlucky one. Ever since that night, I've had trouble sleeping, and I would start to hear whispers and see images of something unexplainable, the figure. I began to hear noises around the house as well. I told my father about what I did. He gave me that look of disappointment, like every parent does when their child has done something wrong. He told me that something has been following me and wants to take me with it. Since then, I have to get blessed once a month, because what he saw explained why he was experiencing the strange occurrences in the house, and it was far too powerful to get rid of. It's been 2 years, and nothing has happened since after being blessed. At least until my sister just gave birth to my niece last year. The night she was born, I had seen the figure again. This time it was more clear than ever. It was skinny, and the skin of it had looked like dried meat. It had no eyes from what I could tell, but it had pitch black sockets. It was grinning at me and showed its teeth. Its long, sharp teeth showing from ear to ear with that nasty grin. At this point, I don't know what to do but be blessed more often. Ever since my niece had been born, she has been terrified of me. She wouldn't be alone with me to hold her or spend time with her because she would bawl as if she's hurt herself accidentally. I never spoke to anyone else about what happened and what I saw, other than the monks and my father, and of course now you guys. Now I continue to be blessed twice a month, and even more if I experience it again. The figure would not and will not leave me alone, but at least I can suppress it. God help me. Don't let it go after my loved ones, and just let it end with me.